everybody. Welcome back to another edition of the Purple People Eater, where I am here with JoDee Curtis and I'm Jeremy York to talk about some of your biggest HR topics that are out there that are permeating the workplace. So, guess what, JoDee? Guess what we're going to talk about today? We're going to talk about some assessments. And a lot of questions that we get from people say, hey, I know that Purple Lake, you do both the CliftonStrengths Finder and you do the DiSC. But why do you do both? Aren't you really only supposed to do one? So, you know what, JoDee, I thought that would be a great topic for us to discuss on why we do that. So, you want to start, talk about why we use both?
Yes, so I would say the real true answer is because I love CliftonStrengths and Jeremy loves DiSC.
That might be true.
But I have really come to appreciate DiSC in the past 8 months. And I think Jeremy has always appreciated CliftonStrengths to somewhat too. And I really have learned and appreciated the value of having both of them here at Purple Lake.
Absolutely. I've always thought it was interesting with any assessment that you can explore and learn more about you and the way that you work, how you can be the best at what you do. And I think both assessments give you that same goal, that we look at it from, I think they look at it from different perspectives, right? And I think the reason we like to use them both, and we continue to do that, is because there's lots to learn from both of the assessments and how you apply it, right? So, one of the questions I think people give to us or ask us, JoDee, a lot of times is that, how do these two assessments apply differently to the workplace from that standpoint? And I know with all the work that I've done with the DiSC assessment and with DiSC, I feel that it's slightly different than the CliftonStrengths Finder, where the CliftonStrengths Finder really takes a deep dive into the individual and, what you do, what you do well, kind of helps you identify the kind of work that aligns with what you're naturally geared toward doing, or I like to call it your natural mode of operation. The DiSC does similar, maybe not quite as deep of a dive, but it does allow us to be able to learn more about ourselves, but also it gives us a lot of information about working with other people who may differ from us. So I like it from a real team perspective because it allows us to have a common language. We start to understand each other, we can describe that, and I think DiSC might be a little bit simpler. It's not quite as complex as CliftonStrengths Finder.
Right. Part of the power of CliftonStrengths Finder is that it recognizes that each of us are unique individuals. So the chance that you would have the same strengths as someone else in the same order are 1 in 33 million.
Wow.
So I think a lot of people like that, right? They don't like to be thought of as just, 1 out of 4 on a graph, although you can tell us more about that and how that's much simpler, but that you're made up of very unique qualities and strengths. It also, though, the purpose or the goal of CliftonStrengths is for each person to understand, what do I do best and how can I do more of it, right? And so a lot of times when I say that, people think like, oh, well, what I do best is recruiting, so I should do more recruiting. Well, it's not that straightforward. It's more about, I'm good at communication. So how can I communicate more often? Or I really am a strategic person. How can I use that particular strength in everything I do?
Yeah, that's interesting. And I agree with that. I think one of the wonderful things about the Strengths Finder is that it does allow us to have that whole full understanding, right? We get our top 5, but we also know we can also dive into the top 34 in the report, right? To find out what really is our full makeup. And I value that. What I always take away from the Strengths Finder is that it's really helped me to understand how I kind of work, right? And what I should align myself with. But the DiSC, I feel like for me, gives me a little bit more and tell me, okay, these are your strengths and what I do well, and the DiSC helps me to understand, okay, now, because it is a little bit simpler, because we do have just the four cornerstone principles, the DISC, and then, 12 priorities around the DiSC wheel, that allows us to understand where other people are at and what they do, and so that we can kind of adapt and understand and have that mutual trust and respect. So I think, both tools are very, very good, and both tools serve a purpose. And I think, depending on what you want to use them for makes all the difference. And so I know we have people that ask us, well, how do the tools fare as a communication team, or as a communications tool? If I can make that up. How does it fare as a communication tool for a team? And I think really, they're both very good.
Right. Excellent.
Both speak to a common language, right? About being able to utilize that with the team, learning about yourself, learning about others. So I think, when people ask us which tool is better, what's the answer?
Depends on the situation.
Right. Neither one is better than the other per se. It all depends on what it is you're trying to do and what you're trying to work toward. And it also depends a little bit about your team and where they're at in their journey of learning about themselves and understanding. So I think, either one of those tools could be very useful. So, JoDee, what would you say is one of the biggest key takeaways that you've learned over the years of utilizing tools like DiSC and CliftonStrengths?
Well, I think they are both excellent, as are most assessment tools, are excellent at self-awareness, right? And helping you understand yourself and how you respond, or why you respond in a different way, or what you need from other people with regards to communication or interaction. But it's the next step too that really adds so much value is when you talk about understanding the styles of the people around you and what do they need and what will make them most productive. How can we treat them in a way that highlights either their strengths and or their style as well?
The thing that sticks out to me about all that, and I totally agree with all of those things that you just said. I think what these tools do is that they help people normalize some of that internal struggle that they have. When we're in a work environment, we focus so much of the time, I feel like, talking about what people are doing wrong instead of what they're doing right. And we really need to focus on what their strengths are, right? Because that way we can align the work with their strengths, and both of these tools help us to be able to do that. But it allows people to say, oh, so that's why I do this, or oh, that's why I think like this, or oh, that's why people perceive me as this or that way. It kind of brings a justification and a normalization and helps them feel more comfortable about those things. I know for me, I have on the DiSC, I have a high level of C of conscientiousness, and I always wonder, why do I have to research things so much before I can come to an answer? And it really drives me insane, but I'm naturally driven to do that. And I get frustrated with myself. I'm like, why can't I just make a decision like that? Well, it's because I have to have that information. And doing the DiSC and also understanding, what my strengths are, having strategic as part of my strengths, help me understand that, oh, okay, this is why I do that, and it's okay. It's okay. It's okay that I do this and other people don't, because it's how I'm wired. It helps me understand it.
Right.
And I think that's great from an employee perspective.
Yeah, one of my favorite examples that I talk about frequently is about myself and one of my very first employees, Emily, who's always on the other side of our camera. And Emily has intellection as one of her top 5 strengths, which means she likes to process things. She likes to think about it. She likes to be prepared. So took me a bit, but I finally have learned that when I want to have a meeting with Emily or I want to talk to her about something, that I not just surprise her with it or bring it up in the moment, that we're much more effective together if I give her a heads up, if I give her information and say, I want to talk about this on Thursday, so think about what some of your questions might be. She also, like you, is a high C on the DiSC profile, so she likes the details. As you well know, I do not like the details. But I really have come to value that in her, and knowing that she'll keep me on track or keep me on my toes because she'll want and need that information.
And that is a good example, JoDee, of how the DiSC and Strengths work together, right? So where there were two separate tools, but they're kind of talking about the same types of behaviors, right? And this is where that sometimes, those tools are very well connected with each other depending on how you use it. So, well, I think that's all of our time that we have here today. And anything you want to say out there to our listeners?
Well, just a reminder that we do train and have the assessments available if anyone listening is interested in learning more about either one of those tools.
Absolutely, and we're happy to talk to you and partner with your team to be the most effective that we possibly can be. So on that, we say to you, have a joy-powered day.